All right, guys, so we got to talk about Vivek Ramaswamy, who is really doing the Lord's work, okay? I really do believe that Vivek Ramaswamy is just running laps around some of these GOP presidential candidates. I mean, it's not even funny, right? I mean, it's one of those things where, I'm not sure if it's more about how talented he is or just about how incompetent the GOP is, right? It's probably both, right? He's probably extremely talented, which I don't doubt, and the GOP is extremely incompetent, which is the reason why a guy like this can basically come out of nowhere and just dominate the field, right? Despite not being a senator or a governor. His political instincts are just amazing, right? They're probably the best that I've ever seen. So, Vivek Ramaswamy here, again, is doing the Lord's work by demanding that the manifesto for the trans shooter that shot up the Christian school in Nashville, Tennessee, demanding that manifesto be released. And him, along with Candace Owens, they're there. He, went out to the courthouse and City Hall to make a speech demanding, again, that manifesto be released so that we can actually, legislate and make public policy to help prevent these types of tragedies from happening in the future. Take a look.
I'm here as a father and as an American. We can't fix the past, but we can prevent tragedies in the future. And the only way to do it is to learn from those mistakes of the past. When an airplane crashes, we recover the black box for a reason. We never want to make that same mistake twice. We have a tradition in this country as law enforcement to do the same thing when there's a mass shooting. It is a long-standing tradition of law enforcement in the United States of America to, when it is recovered, release the manifesto of the shooter. We have to learn from tragedy to prevent it in the future. The manifesto of the killer was made public in each of the following instances: Allen, Texas; Buffalo, New York; Charleston, South Carolina; Isla Vista, California; Monterey Park, California; Poway, California, in all cases within 48 hours of the tragedy. The public demanded the same happen here in Nashville immediately after the tragedy in March. In fact, the National Police Association has since sued city officials and county officials demanding the same. It turned out that on April 27th, Governor Bill Lee, the governor of this state, pledged to release that manifesto. Yet today we're sitting here in August with nothing other than stonewalled silence from our government. That is wrong. That does not build public trust. That erodes public trust. I'm here today to make a demand of the governor of Tennessee, to make a demand of the Nashville Police Department, to make a demand of the FBI. Release the manifesto. Speak the truth. The hard times are the times where we must most openly speak that truth. It is hardest to speak the truth under difficult circumstances, but that is when we require it the most. I understand that there are legitimate concerns, that we do not want details released that will motivate copycats. I don't want that. The fellow Americans who earnestly have called for the release of this manifesto, they don't want that either. And I want to go on record and say it would be perfectly reasonable for the police to redact any sections of this manifesto that lay out specific plans, that lay out specific premeditated plots on details of execution that could be copied by another individual. But what we do need to know is this killer's motives.
Yeah, I agree. Right, I agree. We need the manifesto released to the public so that we can understand the motive of the killer. Now, again, as Vivek Ramaswamy listed out there, in the past, when we've had mass shootings, they released the manifestos, the motives, almost immediately, right? You guys can make a guess in regards to why they did that in those situations and why they're not doing it now. We'll get more into it, but you guys already know what's going on here. But let's go ahead and actually play a news clip from News Nation in which they're going to talk about the FBI and the police and also apparently some of the parents at this Christian school, not really wanting this document to be released to the public. I mean, at this point, it seems like at least some of law enforcement is playing dumb about the document because, again, we all know that the motive, right, behind this mass shooting is not going to play into the narrative that they're pushing in the mainstream liberal media, and that is why they're trying so hard to keep it from becoming public. Take a look.
Then debate has raged over a manifesto that police say they recovered. It was written by the shooter, Audrey Hale. Police have still not made that manifesto public, and some of the victims' families don't ever want the manifesto released, saying it would inspire copycats. Others, however, are calling for full transparency, including a presidential candidate who today called for its release. Joining us now, live from Nashville, is News Nation investigative correspondent Rich McHugh. Why is a candidate for president getting involved in this, Rich?
That's a good question. He sure jumped right into the heart of this debate, Elizabeth. He slammed officials for hiding the documents. He said Americans need the unvarnished truth, that we need to learn from this disaster and move forward.
Release the manifesto. Speak the truth.
Republican presidential candidate Vivek Ramaswamy called on the Nashville Metro Police, the FBI, and others today to release the writings of the Nashville shooter, who took 6 innocent lives at this Christian school here in March.
The best we can do to move forward is to discover exactly what happened so that we may hope and we may pray and we may do our part to make sure that something like this never happens again.
That evening in March, Nashville police told News Nation they were hoping to release redacted portions of a manifesto left behind, and this, the chilling footage of the shooter entering the school and moving down the school corridors. By the next morning, they released the police body cam footage.
Go, 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 go.
And said despite the writings they found from the shooter, they had not determined a motive.
It's quite a bit of writing to it. I have not read the entire manifesto. Our team and the FBI have been working on this.
Then Nashville police pivoted and said they would not release the manifesto. And ever since, there's been intense debate over why the police haven't released it, including whether it has to do with the fact that the shooter identified as transgender. A number of lawsuits have now been filed to force the police to release the documents. But then the parents of the victims weighed in a legal brief and said they do not want the shooter's manifesto released. Now it's important to say that not all the victims' families feel the same way. The brother of Mike Hill, who was killed in the attack, had this to say. He's in favor of releasing it. For me personally, not knowing the shooter's true motives leaves a large void in my heart and in my brother's story. I reached out to Metro Police earlier today, and they told me they're waiting for a court to instruct them how to proceed. That court resumes on this topic in the courthouse behind me at the end of this month, Elizabeth.
Yeah, so I can understand why some of the parents of the victims of that tragic incident that happened that day would not want this document to be released to the public because, again, it probably has detailed plans on how the mass shooter was going to execute people, okay, how they were going to kill people, okay, and they don't want people being inspired by it or getting any ideas from it. However, I think that the public has to know, right? The public has to know what was the motivations of the shooter, and I think that you can release those motivations without necessarily releasing the detailed plans that the shooter drew up in order to execute this mass shooting. Right? I think that you can do those things. And we have to know because we cannot legislate and create public policy without knowing the motives, right? We don't know why this happened, okay? We don't know if this person, again, had some sort of issues going on. We don't know if this person was radicalized, brainwashed by the mainstream liberal media, which I think is what happened, okay? I think that personally, this person was radicalized. I think that what the mainstream liberal media was putting out there about how trans people are under attack, that there is some sort of trans genocide going on in this country, which is not true. Okay, that violence is being done against trans people because the GOP is passing legislation that basically is just common sense. I think those things are probably a part of the reason why this individual was radicalized. I think Democrats in the Biden administration radicalized this individual, if I had to guess, and that probably is what led to this, okay? That's just my guess. Okay, I'm just saying, because, you know, hey, who do they commonly blame for the quote unquote attack against trans people? Well, they blame the GOP. They blame religious people, right? They blame conservatives, okay, as the reason. That's what they do. And again, I wouldn't be surprised if this person was motivated by the things they were hearing in the mainstream liberal media about the rhetoric and this idea being perpetuated by the mainstream liberal media that trans people are under attack. When that's just not true. It's not true at all. It's not based on any facts or reality. But the mainstream liberal media, they spout this nonsense and they radicalize people and individuals, and then they don't face the consequences for it. Right? And that's why we have to have this manifesto released. Again, I could be wrong. Maybe this individual wasn't radicalized. Maybe this individual just had issues that they were dealing with, and that is what motivated them to do this. Okay, maybe there was no motivation. Maybe it was just a random act of violence. I have no clue. But before we start talking about gun control, before we start talking about passing laws to make it harder for law-abiding citizens to protect themselves, we have to have the motivations for why this happened. You cannot legislate on anything when you don't know the motivations for why it happened. It's really that simple. And that's all we have to know. Again, I understand where the parents are coming from. I feel terrible about it. And definitely I don't want to see a copycat happen, but we have to know the motivations. The manifesto needs to be released. Furthermore, we all know why the manifesto is not being released. Because again, if something in the manifesto suggests that this person was radicalized by Democrats or the mainstream liberal media, and the narrative that they put out here, the lies they're putting out here, they're going to have to be held accountable, right? It will be proof and evidence that, hey, this person was radicalized by the rhetoric of the Democrat Party and the media. They will have to be held accountable. So they don't want that, right? The establishment doesn't want that. And we all know that, again, if this shooter was a straight white male and they thought that the motivations were, because of racism, the manifesto would be released immediately, right? Like the Buffalo shooter. And then the media would spin it and try to say that the shooter was a right-wing supremacist who wanted to kill black people because he listened to Tucker Carlson. Even though in the shooter's manifesto, he specifically stated that he is a leftist. He hates Fox News. He doesn't like Tucker Carlson. He just happened to be a left-wing white supremacist, which is a thing, right? There are a ton of left-wing white supremacists out there. But again, according to the media, all white supremacists are right-wing. When I would argue that since, the KKK was founded by the Democrat Party, that there's probably quite a few left-wing white supremacists out there, right? Maybe a vast majority of white supremacists are actually left-wing, right? They're left-wing communists, right? But again, that's not the narrative that the media wants you to hear. So even when we do get clear motives, even when we do get the manifesto released, it's going to be spun by the media, and they're going to be lies told about the actual motivations, because again, they don't want to take responsibility for radicalizing individuals. They radicalize individuals every single day. When they come out here and they talk about how white people are so bad, and that all these states are diversifying, and how demographic change is inevitable, right? And it's so great that, there are going to be less white people in this country in the future, which again is the left-wing version of replacement theory. They just call it demographic change, right? Again, they spout replacement theory all day on television. Again, they just call it demographic change. You could be radicalizing individuals, right? They very well could be radicalizing individuals. I think left-wing radicalization is probably one of the biggest threats in this country. I mean, if you don't believe me, just look at all the major protests or acts of political violence that have happened in this country over the last 3 or 4 years. BLM, Antifa, Roe v. Wade. Do I got to keep going? I mean, again, left-wing movements and groups have been responsible for a vast majority of the political violence and destruction that we've seen in this country, because they've been radicalized by narratives coming from the left-wing liberal media. And in my opinion, that's just my gut feeling for why they're not releasing the document. Now, when it comes to Vivek Ramaswamy, again, he's running laps around these GOP candidates. Again, this is an issue he didn't have to take up. It seems to me that he sincerely wants to know the motive. I want to know the motive. Everybody wants to know the motive. This is something that can easily be swept under the rug. Nobody saying anything about it. But this guy is taking an initiative that Republicans in Congress aren't even really taking an initiative on in terms of speaking out about it publicly, right? And continuing to demand that we bring attention to what happened that day and understanding the motivations for why it happened so it never happens again. This guy, again, he is running laps around these people in the GOP, man. Again, I don't know if it's a reflection of just how smart and savvy he is or just how terrible the Republican Party is. I truly believe it's probably both, right? It's probably both. So again, kudos to him for continuing to fight on an issue that a lot of people have forgot about, and we shouldn't forget about it because at the end of the day, we should understand why these mass shootings happen, whether or not it is a straight white male that commits the act or a trans individual that commits the act. If we can figure out the motive, then the public needs to know, right? They need to know what the motive is. We need to understand why this happened so it doesn't happen again. So let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.